Looks like it's starting up. Let's
Yep.
hit play.
All right. Hey, as long as people can hear
Yeah,
me.
looks like we got the GIMP page open. I can see everything.
All right. So today, as an overview, um, I had done an example on my blog for hey, you need a fantasy town, and I just kind of pulled some generally typical ideas of setting up a mini region on a hex map. And I basically threw in three different size towns, and within the range of those three towns, I put in a smaller adventure site and like a 3 level dungeon, it would be like 100 rooms, as a way to set it up so that it would help people um, create towns very quickly. Just kind of walked them through my process on that. Now with the adventure site, to me, an adventure site is something you can do in less than a session. It's a place that you discover on a hex map, and it takes a half session. It may take most of the session, but it's not like a multiple delve kind of thing. So, Commodore had asked me, "Hey, we're gonna see the ruins of Vic in the adventure set contest." And I don't know, there was like a week and a half, and it was during the holidays, and I was like, I don't know. So one morning, I basically spent 2 hours writing this thing, and I'm not sure how happy I am with it. I basically kind of wrote it and then saved it and forgot it, and I did the map for it. So I can't speak to the quality of it because I haven't really think about it. As a matter of fact, one of the things says blah blah blah, so it's clearly not done. But I knew that I wasn't gonna have time to play test it, and I wasn't gonna have time to make it the way that I wanted the quality of an adventure to be before the end of the contest. So I just said, I don't have the end of the contest. It's fine. I got other things I need to focus on. But the thing that we're going to talk about today is the map. So I have the file open of which I've done this map. It's not a super in-depth map. Like I said, it's a small adventure site. And where's GIMP? I will start from how I started doing all my maps. So the first thing I did is I went out and I found a grid on the internet that was pretty generic. And one of the helpful things about this grid is that it was easy to size to the VTT that I was using, right? But so this one is 3500 by 3500, which means that setting it at 35 pixels in the VTT is going to make it pretty clean. So I just needed this as like a template. I wasn't going to use these lines because it doesn't really give any sort of stylistic impression, right? So as you can see here, I've done some floor tiles basically here that I can repeat. So the next thing I did is that using this pattern, I started doing my own grid. So at 3 point, I would go in here and I would say, all right, if you see at the bottom where it says 270 degrees, whenever it's a interval of 90 degrees, then you can tell it's a straight line, right? So I would do something like that to make sure if I needed a straight line. But really what I wanted to do is give it a little character. So I would just do something like that. Give the dimensions of the tile. Go out here, give it a corner here, give it most of the coverage, and then I would drop down and give it some cracks, maybe some pebbles, right? And I did this for about, I don't know, 20 different tiles, and then I repeated it and made sure it matched up perfectly to this grid. Once I had that, I had this. Now if I hide this, you can see this is very big. And on some of the maps that I've done, I've had to double or quadruple the size. But once I have this basis down, then I can do walls. Dual walls. And I generally set that at 9. And then when I start mapping, I like to keep my lines a bit straighter. So we can go here, here. And then I like to make sure that these are lined up. So what I'll do is go here and make sure that that lands on a clean interval. See, it says 0 at the bottom. Click it once and then do it again. So I got basically outlines from walls here. So let me close off this room. And then we'll make a hallway here.
Can you hear me, Zerb?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
I cannot hear you in Discord. I can only hear you on the stream, so there's a little bit of a delay.
I think that's probably because OBS and Discord are monopolizing the same sound. How do I fix that? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, there we go.
Okay, all right. So I fixed it.
Awesome. And then, so I was wondering for this, do you want to show like, so you're saying basically step one was you drew like, about 20 tiles and then you basically just copy and pasted them to make like a larger template, right?
Yeah, yeah. I did like 20, 25, and I basically kind of established a pattern. I had to do enough of them. Otherwise, then the pattern, like the human eye, is going to be able to like recognize a pattern. It's like, oh, this is gross. I can just keep seeing the repeating pattern. But I did enough of it to give it enough variety. But if you stare long enough, you can start to see the pattern repeating. But it doesn't matter because
Okay.
when you have the finished thing, you're not going to see the whole grid at once. You're just going to see part of the grid because a lot of it's going to be covered up by the dungeon walls and the filler, right?
Right, totally.
So, but I mean, the main thing was to get a grid that you already have the size that already matches up perfectly, right? And then kind of give it your own characteristic and make it a little bit more visually interesting other than just straight squares.
Right. And so is there any way, so I don't know how in depth you want to get for kind of this tutorial, but do we want to kind of show people how to use like the copy and pasting tools to copy those squares on the grid? I'm just assuming some people coming to this will have kind of not really have experience with GIMP, so showing them where this stuff is might be helpful, like inside the program. But if that's like too much of a minutia thing, we could always go back and do something like that later if we just want to
Yeah,
cover
I
the
just
broad.
gotta hide the right things. Your own grid. You want the drawn lines? There we go. Okay. So
Is this better at all, Gus? I see you saying that my volume's way louder. Is this better? Okay, awesome.
I'm just gonna do 4 because I don't want to sit here and do 20 of them.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I think just showing people where the tools are for other people. It sounds like Woad saying he knows how to use GIMP and stuff, but it'll probably be useful for the people that watch it that haven't used GIMP before.
We'll do 6. So basically, you just select it, you copy it, you paste it, and so you have a temporary layer here. And while it's in a temporary layer, you can just do this. Make sure that it overlaps. See? So you have a clean transition to the grid. You can go ahead and anchor it. And now you have 12. So now let's take the 12. Whoop.
And does the anchoring like collapse the temporary layer
It basically
into the
takes
main?
the temporary layer and it puts it down to the master layer below it.
Okay. What hotkey are you using for the temporary layer? Or does it just happen whenever you select it?
Oh, I just right click on it and hit anchor layer.
Okay, gotcha.
So now you have this, and then you repeat this. So now you have, what's this? You have 6 times 4, 24. So now you have 24, and then you double that, and then you have 48, and then you double that, and then you do that until your whole grid is filled up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's not really
Gotcha.
rocket science, but there's enough interest there that it will look better than just having plain squares, right? So
For sure.
I'll go to mine, and then you could draw your walls. I'm gonna just draw a couple rooms. I usually go with 9 on this. It's hard to fucking talk and do this at the same time, by the way.
No, you're good. So yeah, I mean, you're basically just going through drawing the lines, and then it looks like just on the bottom of the program, you can see where the actual degrees are, right? So you're either just to get the true 90-degree angles, or either doing 0 or 90 degrees down there on the bottom.
Right. And I just drew a little cave to go off. Draw a door. Fill the door. Put that in the layer above that. So if we pretend that this is the extent of our dungeon, we could do a number of things, right? There you go. Clean, black background, or if you want to print it out, right? There you go. Right?
Sweet. Yeah, you just go in with the paint bucket and then just fill everything around it.
So the idea is that once you've done a dungeon, because of the way that the various hallways and rooms and stuff go, that repeating pattern makes itself much less obvious. And so once you got the main outline on there, then usually what I do is I'll draw additionally on that layer, and I'll also do shadows. So if you look in that room, you could do shadows by going through the same directional. So here I just do the west and north walls basically to give it a little bit of shadow.
And with that, are you just using basically like a gray shade, or are you turning the opacity down on the
I
black,
turn the
or?
opacity down to between 40 and 60, depending on how dark I want it. And sometimes with some maps, I'll do multiples. Like here, when you zoom in, it's super pixelated, right? But zoomed out, you can see that I added a little bit of shadows to those rocks, so you can see it makes it look like there's actually something there, right?
Right.
Sometimes I'll do three different shadow layers if I want to, if depth's important, right? So sometimes you'll do like a hallway goes into a cave, but the cave drops down like it goes down like 15 feet, and then you're at like a base level, and then it rises again and goes up, and you want to imply on the map that that it's deeper in this point. So what you'll do is you'll make another layer for another layer of shadows that's darker. So you'll kind of slide it a little, probably towards 50, and then you'll fill that in with shadow. So like here, this if I duplicate this layer, actually, if I just do a new layer, call it.
Gotcha. And so also for people who haven't used GIMP or a similar program before, these layers, each one basically forms a mask, right? So you start at the very bottom, you can see he has the background layer, and then each new layer that he creates basically stacks on top of the other and masks over it. So you can adjust those and move them around, and that'll decide basically what you're drawing is on top or on bottom. So rather than just having one map where you're putting all the stuff in, you can have a bunch of different layers, overlapping each other, which makes drawing a lot easier, and that's why we're able to draw over the grid and everything.
So this one I
Someone
made.
was wondering what DPI you use to draw the maps.
I just go with whatever the guide is. So if you go, where's the thing? View. There's a thing that view that. DPI. What kind of question is that?
I'm gonna be honest, I don't know what DPI is.
It's dots per inch, but
Oh, right, right,
yeah,
right.
image properties. There we go. So I'm using 3500 by 3500, which is what I talked about at the beginning. That way, that
Mm,
when you're doing it on a VTT, if you set it to 35 for each square, 35 by 35 for each square, then you can fit 100 squares, which is a pretty good size for most things. But like I also said, like some of my dungeons are like two of these maps side by side. Some of them are four of these maps. Some of the mega dungeon stuff is like six of these maps that just kind of go zone to zone to zone. But on a VTT, I'm not going to try to fit all of those anyway. I'm generally just going to try to stick to 100 by 100 squares or 200 by 100, and then just kind of cordon it off in sections. But yeah, this one right here is 3500 by 3500, and that's generally the you could just Google this grid that I had, and that's what it came with, and it was really convenient, the size, and I knew that it was gonna snap in cleanly to VTTs, so I just used that as a template. I made the grid background that was a bit more stylized, and then I drew all the walls and I filled in the negative areas. I did the shadows, and that's like the quick and dirty behind it. Um, so I just did another shadow layer, right? And I set this one darker, right? So this one's 56, right? I can actually probably make that
mhm.
lighter. This one's 60. And see, there's already shadows in here. So with a double shadow layer, you make it even darker. So that gives like the implication that it's deeper, right?
Right.
And then I don't really want it, so I'm gonna get rid of it. But you'll have your other your shadow layer, so you can actually give more implications of depth. Now this place has got some outside stuff in it, so one of the things I want to do is I'm gonna want to get rid of these grids, so they're not so harsh on the outside. So when I draw some of the external mausoleums and stuff that are going to be out there, because I decided to actually put effort into this thing, so I'm gonna like make it. I'm not gonna try to shoehorn it into 3 pages. I'm gonna try to let it breathe for another couple pages,
Hmm.
and I don't want this grid on the outside. So one of the things that you could do with the grids is you can set the opacity. You can set it down here, right? Now, what that kind of does is it has the unintended side effect of making your dungeon tiles a little bit fainter, and you don't necessarily want that. So what you can do, you can set it back, and you can use your lasso tool. And I don't have to be terribly precise on it in most places because layers are covering it up. So what I'll do, so I have this section, right? And this basically encompasses all of the inside stuff. The places where I want the lines to be darker. So I'll cut them out, right? Lines disappeared. Oh no. I'll paste it as a new layer, and what I'll do is I'll go make that a new layer. So now, looking at this, nothing changes from the original, right? But now that I have this layer, I can take this original layer and I could drop the opacity down, and I can make that a lot more fainter so it doesn't get in the way. Probably want to actually even go down further. It doesn't really stand out as much as being, like the inside dungeon tiles. The other thing I could do is I could actually just completely erase it. I can actually completely erase it and draw things to scale out here. So once you have that grid, what I did is I saved it to its own file because I use this grid over and over and over again. And then once you've got it into its own file, you can chop it up any way you want. And then the next time you do the next dungeon or adventure site, you'll be able to just use the same grid. But here, I don't need that, right? I'll be able to actually, put out the mausoleums and stuff like that. And in fact, what'll be helpful is that I'll be able to draw them using the guidelines here and then just hide them later.
Gosh, right. So then when you drop it into a VTT, it'll all still be lined up and everything
Yep.
with the existing grid.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's an implied grid. So I mean, even if you didn't want there to be floor tiles, by having everything cleanly lined up, you can hide it all, and then you could just go with the VTT's implied layers. But for those that are going to be using these at home, you'll want to where did my there you go. You'll want to, if you want to print this out or whatever, you're probably going to want the grids on it anyway. But for a VTT, you could totally just get rid of the grids after the fact and just go with the implied grid because it'll all snap into place if you use the pixel size correctly.
Sweet. And then what about for like icons inside of the map? Like I see you have some statues, you got stairs and that kind of stuff. How are you drawing that? How are you putting that in?
I'm just drawing.
You're kind of just doing all that, just drawing them in. Gotcha.
Yeah, like that's a cat statue, so I just drew a cat. I basically looked at my cat on the floor and I drew it. But one thing you could do is, hold on, I'll do for an example, right? View layer, scale layer. I'm gonna put that as like 3500. Okay, so I just Googled this key. If I so wanted to, this comes out super blurry. There's not a whole lot of high resolution. You could probably find high resolution, but here, I'll make this a new layer. What you could do is you make yourself a new key. right? So new key, and obviously that's too thick. That's about right. Do is make that a straight line, and then drop this down to and now you have your symbol, right? Actually, let me get rid of this part here.
Right. So that's a great example of how the layering comes in handy a ton. So if you know you're someone who's not super great at drawing, you can always grab an existing drawing, and even if it's low resolution, you can just draw over it in a new layer. And then this is something that can just get copy and pasted inside of the other project.
Right. So you mean you want to be cognizant of the sizing. So this thing is like 4 times the size that I need it to be. So if I wanted it to be right there,
Gotcha. So you're just using the scale layer tool
right,
to drop that down.
and you lose some fidelity. So it's important to get the layer size right, so you don't have this happen. But assuming you had it right? So I'll just fix it.
And what were the numbers that you entered to scale it down to this template? You kind of just kind of put in numbers until it works out, or is there kind of a like a rubric for scaling to a certain size?
I just looked at that and I said that's clearly 4 times the size that it needs to be. So I went to a scale layer and I divided it by 4.
Cool.
And then I moved it. Now I don't like this symbol, right? But you could find better symbols. There's a million symbols out there. Chances are you're gonna want to redraw them because they are fuzzy, right? But the good news is you can make your own layer, make sure it's sized right, and you can do this. But honestly, I don't see the problem in just using this as a guide to draw your own symbols, like that statue with the star on it. Just draw statues with the stars on them. Make some spike pick traps, make some doors, make some pillars. It really doesn't take all that much artistic talent to do it. But some people may want to use a set template, but the thing is, you're going to either have to find high resolution ones, or you're just going to find one and then kind of redraw them yourself and then cut and paste. But I'm telling you right now, just getting them cut and pasted and then lining them up, it's probably easier just to draw your pit trap, draw your stairs,
Yeah, and especially for these old school maps, you really don't need a lot. They don't need to be crazy. It's pretty easy to pretty straightforward to put this together.
If you're trying to make like a VTT map with like, it shows the rug that's in the room, and it shows the wood grain on the floor, and it shows the fireplace, and it shows the candlestick on the fireplace, and all that stuff. Like, you don't want to do this. You want to like fire up something that has like a very robust asset pack, like Dungeon Draft, using like the Forgotten Adventures asset pack. Like, you could do that kind of stuff if you're interested in making what I like to think of as visual cue map, right? So when I run your guys' game through it, I just basically use a map like that because it kind of emulates the way we've been mapping dungeons for decades, right?
Right.
You need to know the major features. You need to know where the walls are. You need to know the size of the room. You need to know where the doors are. You need to know that there's a statue over there. You need to know there's a pile of rubble over there. You need to know some stuff. Um, but the visual cue stuff, like modern D&D uses a lot of it, and some people are just big fans of it, is that they'll put like hints to stuff right on the dungeon room, and it makes DMing, it changes the way you DM, right? Because you can open you can reveal the room that they just walked into, and they see the bearskin rug, and they see the candlestick, and they see something that might look like a candelabra, and then they see a little chest off in the corner, and then the players are prompted to be like, hey, it looks like a chest over there, what's in the chest, right? Whereas I prefer to do more of a, you're in a 30 by 30 foot room, there's a chest at the far end of the room, there's a wet spot on the stone floor right before it, and there's some coat rack pegs on the east wall or whatever, right? And then your players can engage that way. So you got to decide what you want to do. I probably wouldn't flip flap back and forth, because players may get used to like sort of pixel bixing your VTT maps, and then once you switch to something more basic where you're trying to be more verbal about how you're conveying the dungeon, it might be an adjustment period depending on the player.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I definitely agree. We've done mainly in your game, working off of, like you were saying, just operating off of the DM's descriptions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which I think ultimately probably ends up for a more granular experience, just because the DM can envision and you can write in a lot more detail than it's convenient to really draw into a map. It also avoids situations where you're like fighting against a bunch of dudes and someone's like, I see this barrel on the map. Can I hide behind this barrel?" And it just, I don't know. Like you're saying, pixel bitching is like a good way to put it. It really kind of does become that, which isn't horrible. Definitely, I've played in games where I think it's pretty fine, but definitely something that's worth being cognizant of.
Yeah, I'm not against it at all.
Yeah, totally.
I just, um, I guess the biggest thing I can say about the direction that I'm going to is that I'm like, this dungeon right here.
Hmm.
I like a lot of these dungeons. I'm running in real life. I'm running online, and I'm trying to put it into a book. And if I had to do an online map in addition to, how to DM this thing map, um, that would like double the work, honestly.
Oh,
I,
for sure.
I could do it, and like if my players were burning through content like at a quarter of the speed, like I think on Tuesday we did like 4 or 5 rooms an hour, right?
Mm.
And I think it was like 22, 21, 22 rooms in like 3.75 hours, and it was like 8 fights and all that stuff. If my players weren't shredding through content, I wouldn't mind sitting there and like, individually lovingly crafting each like pebble that rolled off a boulder in every cavern, and like I could do that,
Yeah.
and it would look cool, and I'd use all these texture packs and everything like that, and shit, I'll put in mood lighting too, right? Like I wouldn't mind doing that because you can have a lot of fun with it, but I mean, particularly the online campaign, with like these huge dungeons that it's like, oh, there's more floors to this thing, and there's a lot more to this dungeon that you guys will leave on the table because something else will interest you. That's the nature of the open world, right? You run off somewhere.
Right.
So if I spent like double the prep time on like making sure that like the textures are like lovingly crafted, and they're just like some shadows kind of bouncing off the pillars and all that stuff, right now. And then you guys like spent like one session, you got like 15 rooms in, and then you're like, you know what, this place sucks. Like it's too hard. Like I don't want to fight all those mummies, or I don't. It's like I think that there's something really dangerous in here, and I think we're kind of under level for this place. Let's go find something else. And then that content just sits there on my VTT for like a year and a half until somebody decides to come back to it. It's like nah. There's a certain amount of prep that you have to be okay with the kind of content you're doing, and especially with me splitting the content of doing it IRL and online. Um, I've just opted not to take on that extra work. However, if I was playing in a game and a DM like made kick-ass rooms that like I could see the bearskin rug and I could see the treasure chest and I could see the candelabra and I could see the corpse off in the corner, I would absolutely have fun with it.
Yeah, it can definitely be cool. Like you said, I guess the biggest thing definitely is just an efficiency of prep, especially open world stuff where you're having to make tons and tons of content. Um, Having that be as efficient as possible, I think is just kind of a must.
Yeah, I mean I'm trying to do a lot too, and you know that there's a lot of work that's being done with like writing these things too, right? If I was like running like a Castle Zintlin like game or whatever, like Milan's already wrote up everything for me. He's already got my tables done for me. He's already got my maps done for me. I just have to like put it somewhere. And if I want to improve on like the maps to make them a little bit more, to make them have actual stone texture and lighting and stuff like that, then like I could totally do that. And that's kind of like setting up for like a this is the game, this is the dungeon that you agreed to play kind of deal, right? So if
Right.
if you want to play, you're doing this dungeon. Whereas like running an open world game means that like they could dive into your 3 or 4 level dungeon for like 2 sessions and then completely get interested in something else, and you don't see them even talking about revisiting that thing for like a year and a half or whatever. And that's just the nature of sandboxes. They're gonna go wherever the wind decides that they're gonna go, right?
Right. Gotcha. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, I think we covered. I mean, I think that's one of the strengths of this kind of mapping stuff is it's pretty straightforward. I think you are getting a pretty detailed map that does work, is very useful, and can just be plugged into a VTT, which is a huge plus. Um, yeah, I can't think. What can you think of anything else would be helpful to go over for people? If anyone has any questions or anything, they can put them in, and we'll cover it.
Um, I mean, there's packaged dungeon mapping too, right? Um, there's Dungeon Scroll out there. The problem with these particular program, it's not like just Dungeon Scroll, is that like whenever you see a map, you instantly know it's from Dungeon Scroll. Like from if you're using Dungeon Draft and using the default stuff, like you instantly know it's from Dungeon Draft. And to me, that's kind of like, okay. But at the same time, it works. It works perfectly fine. It makes a perfectly clear, legible map, it'll save you a lot of time. I mean, I could show Dungeon Draft if people were interested in it, but the I think Dungeon Draft was one of the easier, more intuitive dungeon sketcher routers that I've ever done, and I was using it for a while. I used it for like pretty solidly for like 2 years, and doing dungeons in that like allows you to like save a lot of time. I mean, your dungeons start to look a little bit samey, and then you go out and you buy like really high resolution asset packs, and then all of a sudden your files are like 8 times the size that they normally were, and they take 8 times as long to load and all that stuff. But now that I've kind of settled into GIMP, I'm kind of in that place where I'm happy with the outcome that I'm getting from just doing it in GIMP. But at the same time, if you look at in our Discord, if you look under projects and you go to Stripes thread for the Sorcerer's Labyrinth, he does a lot more advanced stuff than I'm doing. Like he uses like the Gaussian blur to like actually like automatically generate the shadows. He's using like actual like textures on a lot of places on the map. So he definitely spends a lot more time on his. So like I would say if you wanted like advanced GIMP stuff, that take a look at Stripes thread. But as far as what I'm doing, if you just need dungeons to play, like I do these pretty quickly, and they work. So
Yeah, and I think that's the some of the biggest stuff I see for using something like this or Photoshop is that honestly the floor is really low, so it's really easy to get into it and just start making the maps, and then the ceiling for what you can do with personalizing maps and making them how you want to look is super high. Hopefully next week I'll be able to show some hex mapping and how I do that with Photoshop, as well as like some bit mapping stuff to kind of give it more of like a personalized look and stuff. But yeah, definitely ping Stripe as much as possible, DM him as much as possible. He loves that, so you should absolutely get in the Discord and just add him whenever possible, I think.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Well, I think we're gonna close this one out, and then the next time we'll let you talk about the hex crawl stuff. My hex stuff is a lot less. A lot less. It makes a lot less sense because I draw a lot of it, and I don't think that helps people out. But I think that the results that you have actually like are really cool, and I can't wait to talk about that.
Sweet. Yeah, it should be cool. A lot of my stuff is pretty templated, so I think it should be easy for people to do. And yeah, I think it'll come out looking really good. So I'm super excited to do that. Awesome. Well, yeah, if anyone has any questions on this, you can put it in the comments. We'll respond to it. You can always come talk to us in the Discord. We'll have a link for that down in the description. So you can come in there, ask us any questions you have. If there's enough of them, we might just do like, revisit the map making thing. But I think this is a pretty solid start for anyone who's wanting to just get into using GIMP. Like I said, or like Serb said, Stripes thing in projects is really good to look at as well. So, all right, I think we're all good to go.
All right. Thanks, everybody.